I mean, it's kind of what the Bible says, right? My sheep can hear my voice and they follow, right? I
Mm.
mean, sometimes it's like, even without research, you just feel like you know something to be true. You
Mhm.
don't know what it is or what's telling you. And then
Yeah.
slowly along the way, you start seeing little bits of evidence, right? You're like, in the back of my mind, I have this feeling that this has got to be true. And then you start seeing little evidence here and there, and you're like, okay, now it actually might be true.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think that I think that I said I liken that to what I was saying. Like I didn't know. That's why I said I made a video like over the summertime, one of my first podcasts, and I was saying there's something deep in my soul that says there's something weird that went out west in the United States. It's just like I know something happened here. Like I don't, obviously the geological experts, I didn't buy any of that stuff. And once I physically went there, like you really, I mean, it literally looks like the mountains were melted like wax. I mean, that's the best I can describe it as. It looks
Mhm.
like that. So like whatever they say, don't give me this millions of years stuff, because obviously nobody could prove that, even if that was the case. But
Mhm.
but I think that's what it comes down to. But I think it is interesting when you talk about the building specifically, because I said, like, as I said, I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole in different places. Before I woke up spiritually, I watched that show Ancient Aliens, because I think most people, probably the first megalith that we know about is obviously the Giza plateaus. We know about the Great Pyramids, but until somebody really points out the size and scope of it, and they point out like the granite stuff and the obviously even more impressive stuff in Egypt, it really doesn't. You just don't understand. Oh well, the Egyptians were advanced. But then what shows like Ancient Aliens did, even though their narrative is incorrect,
Mhm.
they show so many places like that all around the world. And I think that's when you have to like start to square it in your brain, like, wait a minute, how did all these people do that stuff? And like then you get the mainstream answers. They make no sense. I mean, like the copper tools stuff is just it's clown stuff that they're saying they did. Sorry, Paul. It makes no
Yeah.
sense that they cut those blocks with copper tools, rocks that are
Well,
harder than the tools.
a lot of people say now, oh, well, we know how they did it now. They created a geopolymer and then a cast, and then they filled it with geopolymer and stamped it down and then
Yeah.
removed the thing, and then you had a block. They didn't actually build and move blocks. But then at the same time, we have images of huge obelisks made out of one piece of stone,
Right.
half cut out the ground, unfinished. So who was going to lift that stone once it was finished? Is what I'm saying. Like it's like,
Well, what's funny is somebody like as somebody with a construction background. My family has owned a construction company. I've actually physically done the work, and we would do plaster. So like if you do stucco is cement and lime and sand. So guess what? Even if the stuff was poured, it's still heavy. Like, you know what I mean? So like you could say, oh well, he did. It wasn't concrete before he poured it, but it's like, but the bags still weigh a lot. The bags, like shoveling the sand, still was hard. So like the idea that it's way easier for them to mix the stuff, and it's like it all weighs the same. So like explain to me how that's easier. I mean, it looks like they weren't poured because it's like, especially like the megaliths, they're typically not uniform sizes.
mhm,
They're different shapes. They're all like how do they make the pyramid level when all the blocks are different? That's way
mhm.
harder than if they were all the same. And if you had a mold, wouldn't they all be the same? So I think that, I mean, I think that's somebody who doesn't have a construction background. They have no idea about the actually physically making these things. Point being is that I think that once people started to wake up to all the megaliths, they're like, wait a minute, something's wrong. There's obviously a lost civilization, and obviously biblically, a worldwide flood makes sense to why we don't know what happened the time before, especially when all these legends involve like gods and giants. It's like, well, that sounds like Genesis 6 and 7. But then you go forward to where we're talking, the space we're talking about now. It is like, talk about like right under your noses. Everyone's like wanting to go to the Amazon, and they want to go over to Egypt to look at megaliths, and you're like, you got something more impressive right in your, like right downtown from you. It's equally as mysterious as like, wait a minute, the first floor is under the ground, and then all the shapes in this place are all perfect, and it doesn't look like anything you've ever seen. And so I don't, like I said, to me it's like that physical evidence is really like, you know the pictures aside, because the pictures, if you go to these places, the pictures don't do it justice. And I implore people, if you do have a building like that in your town, go research the history of it. And 9 out of 10 times the history, it sounds like it's lies, probably because it is. Like we went, like my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, we went to Asheville, North Carolina, and this is where the Vanderbilts built the biggest mansion in the United States. It's called the Biltmore Estate. And you're just looking at this thing, and it's like, supposedly this guy built this when he was like 30 years old, and he didn't live in it very long. And I was like, aren't the Vanderbilts from like New York? Why did they build it like kind of out in the boonies in North Carolina? And yeah, it's all of it's like copper domes, gargoyles. It's got like antennas everywhere. Like the bedrooms are very small. Now that I mentioned, I don't remember them showing us the bathroom. Maybe there wasn't one in there. And you're like, what was this place? And then if you look at it from the side, it looks like, yeah, these places were like lightly laid out where they had gardens. Like maybe they grew stuff there, and this thing was some kind of electrical conductor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's water around it. I mean, I was kind of blown away. Like I said, the mainstream take makes no sense because it's like, obviously being rich. Yeah, I get it, building a big house, but it's not like it doesn't look very comfortable. It doesn't look like a place you would live. It looks like a museum. It doesn't look like it doesn't look like a 30-year-old's bachelor pad. that's for sure.
And surely it would have been cold as well, right? And very difficult to heat. And it would have just been the practicality of living in it isn't actually as clear as they make it out to be. Like, I've noticed this as well. They have those strange fountains as well. Like, you talk about no toilets, and they have these huge ornate fountains.
Well, that's what the crazy part is. People are told that these people couldn't create indoor plumbing. Meanwhile, I think one of these places, I think it was in England, that they had this fountain that could shoot like 250 feet in the air. And there's fountains all over the property, and it's like, okay, so I think that they were pretty good at plumbing, but they couldn't create a toilet that flushed.
A cistern, the most simplest water gravity-based system ever devised. Like,
right.
Yeah,
So so that it obviously makes no sense when you realize it, again, like, even look at what the Romans had. The Romans created all those aqueducts, like, I don't know how many thousands of years ago, supposedly. They knew how, first of all, these people knew how to get rid of waste, and they knew how to move water from for a long time. So yeah, so the idea that these people didn't know how to do these things, yeah, and they didn't know how to, they were all freezing to death in these gigantic mansions. It's like, I think that's what people don't really understand. It's like these people were very smart. They always try to tell us the people from before were not as smart as we are. But these people were very smart. So like with that kind of idea, well, they were kind of just coming along with it a little bit. Like Ben Franklin taught them about electricity, about the key and the lightning. No, like, these people were obviously super smart. Anybody who could do what they did, and if they did it with the tools that they supposedly had, they were way smarter than even us. Because if you can create things with less advanced tools, doesn't it actually make you more advanced? Not, they were smart enough to do what we can't do, but they weren't smart enough to find an easy way to do it by creating a tool that would make it easy.
Who said they even used their hands to build these things? I mean, if the saints were involved, if these are millennial things, who knows how these things were built? Maybe they were just willed into existence by just imagination, for all we know. If these saints are resurrected in like the 9 dimensions of perception or something like that, what does it mean to have a glorified body? What does that mean? Like, we can't even understand that, the abilities these people may have had. Who knows? Because it's not that maybe with enough money and time and effort and manpower, perhaps we could come close to building these things. Maybe it is possible, but the people who were told built them should not have had those capabilities or manpower or the time or the money. And we even us today, with all our amazing technology, we don't build things as beautiful or as ornate as they did. We don't have the time or power or money, or we don't even see the point.
Well, there's not modern buildings that we walk past and say, "Wow, I wonder how they did that."
No,
like we know. And I said, it was funny. My wife was actually saying the exact same thing to me. She was like, "I want to see pictures of people building those things." Like, if you really think about it, man is nothing but prideful. If you built some of these structures, wouldn't you be proud of it? Like, wouldn't you be documenting all the things you did, like all along the way? Like, we're building the thing that nobody's ever seen before because they're all unique. Like, wouldn't there be pictures of all that stuff? Because it's like everyone's super impressed, but like there's pictures of mud on streets. There's not pictures of people using hammers and chisels to carve out these domes and whatever.
Because most totalitarian thinkers who aren't coming from the Christian perspective, they believe there's multiple resets that keep happening. And what we're seeing are remnants of societies that got too big for the boots, too hard to control. So the controllers just hit a button, destroyed everything, caused a mud flood, and then started again and moved back in and did repopulation events of some kind. It's very much giving all the power to them, isn't it? That's what the Tartarian, I've always found their research always leads to. The controllers have all the power, and at any moment they could just hit that button and reset everything.
Next question is that, like, it does feel like that again. So like people are saying, like, how are like everyone kind of coming on to these similar ideas at the same time, and it's like, why is everyone talking about these buildings now? And it's like, I think because obviously the fact that, again, you were saying you walked past these buildings in your own town, you didn't even notice them until you started to know what you were looking at. And then so like as the more of these things are getting shared, obviously the more people are like us are digging into this stuff. Are you guys feeling like, I don't know, I don't ever want to be so tunnel vision in my own little creator space, in my own little sphere of people who I watch. Is what we're waking up to this possible short season? Because I know preterism, as far as I know, it's not new. But I think to the level of people saying, here's physical evidence of this. I didn't hear this until recently. Do you guys think that this is becoming like a more accepted idea, or this is like, are we like kind of the tip of the spear on people talking about this kind of stuff? Or is this growing, or am I just imagining that?
Maybe we're close to the end, and that's why, whenever you're close to the end of days, like in the Bible, whether it's the flood or Armageddon, there's always, I guess, people realizing the truth, right? Like with Noah's flood, right? He warned them what's going to come. And then with Armageddon, Jesus said, here's what's going to come. So it's like information gets out close to the end. So maybe we are at that final stretch, basically. And that's why this is all coming out. It's like a cycle. Every cataclysm type of event, at the end of it, or when you get close to the end, a bunch of information comes out. And it's not that people are more accepting. It's just that the information is getting out there.
But what do you think? But Vitaly, do you think that, as far as, since you've been making these videos for a little while now, have you noticed more like the videos you're making now? Are you getting like, did you ever have a point where you were making these videos and people were like, oh, that's heretical what you're saying, and like they're like the ratio of people calling you heretics to versus saying that makes a lot of sense? You think that that's increasing?
There's like three kinds of people. There's people who say it's heretical. There's people who are looking into it, and then there's people who just like are kind of lost. They're like, I don't know. I'm really confused about both. Like, I don't know if either or is true. And I still think this is more rejected than anything, because you interviewed Paul, that one lady from No Place Like Home, right? Is that the channel?
Shelley from No Place. There's No Place Like Home. Yeah.
But she made a great point, and she said that like in today's day and age, Christians are very like self-absorbed. They always want to put themselves in parts of Scripture where they're not. Like, we are the saints, right? We are going to go through tribulation.
We're the Church of Philadelphia, the one that gets raptured.
Yeah, Paul was writing those letters to us, those churches you don't want to be. He wasn't literally writing a letter. So this is about us, me, right? So I think that's why it's upsetting for people if this is true. But one thing I don't understand is people make it seem like if this is true, then all hope is lost. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, just because we don't get to be part of a 1,000-year kingdom doesn't mean all hope is lost. You should look to the eternal kingdom. Like, that's what I'm looking for.
Right.
But yeah, I guess it sucks that we're not part of the beginning, right? It's the first time we've had peace in 1,000 years, or for 1,000 years since the fall of Adam and Eve, right? So that would be exciting to be part of, but it's not the end of the world to me. Whether this is true,
well, maybe it is the end of the world.
It is literally.
No, but I mean, I was even joking, was because I was saying like it's interesting when people say, and I even said this. I said, well, if you're saying that there is no, if there is no second coming to look forward to, then maybe you are kind of like shipwrecking people's faith. But then I actually thought about it. I'm like, but people said the same thing to me when I said the pre-trib rapture was not biblical, because they had this hope in this rapture before anything bad happened. Like, so if your hope was in that, let's just say that they're still right. Like that there is still hope that that's the way it happens. You'd have to admit that throughout history, nobody's been raptured yet. So if all your hope was in that, maybe that is not the place you should put it anyways. Maybe it should have always been at the place that there's no tears, the New Jerusalem. Maybe that's where it's always should have been. Just because Jesus is he's offering eternal life. He's not offering you a rapture. Like that's literally what he's offering us is eternal life. So like, where does that mean? Like, when does that start? Obviously, if you accept Christ, that starts immediately. But he never, like, that's not what his lead was. Hey, don't worry, I'm going to take you up into the clouds before anything gets bad. In this world, you will not have tribulation. You'll have a rapture. He didn't say, he never said that.
While we're on this topic, people often ask, so why would the devil lie about this? Okay, he's lying to us that we're in the short season. So what's the point? I'm like, the point is that we might be preparing for the wrong event. And if we are prepared for the wrong event, we might see God as the Antichrist and his big old flying New Jerusalem mothership as the Antichrist and his legion, right? Instead of Christ and the saints. So this, hypothetically, if this is true, most people are preparing for the wrong thing. And when Jesus appears with the saints, if we are in the short season, most Christians are either going to be against it, fight it along with the rest of the world, or something else. So people are probably preparing for the wrong event. Everyone's waiting for what happens before Christ returns, right? Armageddon, the Antichrist, all this craziness. And what's crazier than a mothership appearing in the sky, like sci-fi looking battles happening? You're like, okay, this is the time of the Antichrist. Yep, that floating thing, that is not from Jesus.
Or now that people even in the truther spec might say, oh, this is Project Bluebeam. That's not even real. Yeah. Like, I don't even believe that's real, because we know that there's no flying spaceships or flying, cities. Like that can't be real.
People are preparing for the wrong thing, maybe. So that's why he would lie. If I was the devil, like the Bible says, like, be as wise as a serpent. And what would the devil do, or why would he lie about this? Or in fact, I'd like to ask people this question. If we're not in the little season, how is Satan going to act in the little season? Like, how is he going to lie about it, right? So think about like those questions and write it out. Like, what is he going to do during this short season if we're not in it currently? Is he going to tell people the millennial kingdom never happened? Because I think that's something he would say.
Right.
He probably did already. Right.
Well, he would say, like I said, I think that the typical futurist view would be there would be a physical kingdom in Jerusalem, and it would be all from there. And again, so like, I think that's why when I would read Revelation 20 and I said, he deceives all the nations, how does he do that if the God King is right over there? Like, I'm going to stick with God over here, because I know what happens to you. Like, so maybe it's not so physically visible. And I said, it's interesting, like, that if like the Marvel movies are showing Thanos as some representation of Jesus coming down in a ship to wipe out humanity, like it's obviously does seem like they're prepping this thing of like that he literally is the bad guy. But again, if you love the world, he is the bad guy, because he's literally coming to do what he says he's going to do, which obviously if you love the world, it's not good. But I said, it's interesting how like in the Marvel movies, they say that they have a 1 in 14 million and something chance to beat Thanos. Well, somehow Satan convinces the nations of the world to march up the broad plain to fight Jesus, where they have a less than 1 in 14 million chance. They have 0 chance to defeat Jesus. And yet he still gets them to go do it. I mean, I do think that that is worth wrestling around in your mind of like, so how would he do it? And obviously I think that's what we're saying is like, it's obviously by any means necessary. Any way that he would lie to you, he would and could. Even it meant he killing people who are witnesses to these things and like burying the dead and re-educating the orphans. I mean, would he do that? I mean, I think the devil would do that. again, so like people are